After centuries of war, Japan was finally at peace, and the Tokugawa shoguns would do almost anything to keep it that way. But European merchants and missionaries had already reached Japan. As foreign trade expanded, Christianity was spreading with it. The Tokugawa increasingly feared that foreign religion and influence could become a threat to their authority. In the 1630s, the shogunate imposed sweeping restrictions on foreign contact. Japan was not completely cut off, but its gateways to the outside world would now be tightly controlled. In 1637, crushing taxes, hardship, and religious persecution ignited rebellion in Shimabara. Peasants and masterless samurai took up arms. Tens of thousands of rebels gathered at Hara Castle. The shogunate responded by sending an overwhelming force against them. In 1638, Hara Castle fell. The rebellion was crushed, and Tokugawa hostility toward Christianity hardened even further. At Nagasaki, Dejima became one of Japan's most important controlled windows to the outside world. The ships carried more than goods. Maps, medicine, astronomy, and new scientific ideas were also entering Japan. This became known as Rangaku Dutch learning. Japanese scholars studied Western medicine, astronomy, and technology. Japan had restricted the outside world, but it had not stood still. Its cities were growing, commerce was booming, and a remarkable new culture was emerging. Foreign contact was restricted even further, yet Japan was never completely sealed. At Nagasaki, a narrow gateway to the outside world remained open. Japan had largely closed itself to the outside world, yet within its borders, Edo was rapidly growing into one of the largest cities on earth. Years of peace fueled commerce. Merchants grew wealthier than ever, and the urban economy continued to expand. Artisans and craftsmen transformed Japan's cities. As prosperity grew, an entirely new urban culture began to emerge. This prosperity transformed more than the economy, it reshaped art and entertainment. In Edo, a remarkable new culture was beginning to flourish. Peace did more than expand the cities. In Edo, theater, music, and public performances became part of everyday life. As tea houses, entertainment districts, and artistic circles flourished, people embraced a new lifestyle known as ukiyo, the floating world. During this era, ukiyo woodblock prints emerged. Japanese artists transformed everyday life and nature into timeless works of art. For centuries, samurai had ruled the battlefield. Now, in an age of peace, they were searching for a new purpose. Japan was continuing to change. Decades of peace transformed the lives of the samurai. Most no longer lived on battlefields, but within Japan's growing cities. Many samurai became administrators, officials, and advisors. Their swords were increasingly replaced by documents and government service. Yet the spirit of the samurai endured. The ideals of Bushido honor, loyalty, and discipline were passed from one generation to the next. Japan remained largely isolated from the outside world, yet through the tiny island of Dejima, in Nagasaki, Western knowledge and technology continued to enter the country quietly. Dejima was more than a trading post. It was Japan's only window into Western science. Japanese scholars began translating Dutch books. Their work became known as Rangaku Dutch learning. Western knowledge in medicine, astronomy, and engineering gradually reached Japan, laying the foundation for dramatic changes yet to come. More than 2 centuries of peace were about to end. Ships appearing on the horizon would soon change Japan's destiny forever. In the summer of 1853, the American Navy entered Edo Bay. Its steam-powered warships displayed a level of power Japan had never witnessed before. Commodore Perry delivered a letter from the President of the United States. Its message was clear: Japan must open its ports. The shogunate faced an impossible choice. Resistance could mean war, while acceptance would end more than 2 centuries of isolation. After more than 2 centuries, the Edo order had reached an irreversible turning point. Japan stood on the threshold of change. In 1854, the Convention of Kanagawa was signed. After more than 2 centuries of isolation, Japan opened its doors to foreign nations once again. Foreign ships could now enter Japanese ports. After generations of isolation, Japan was reconnecting with international trade. The decision divided Japan. Some believed change was inevitable, while others blamed the shogunate for weakening the nation. The Tokugawa Shogunate had begun to crumble. Soon, Japan would witness the greatest political transformation in its history. Japan was now divided. One side fought to preserve the shogunate, while the other demanded that power be restored to the emperor. The last shogun, Tokugawa Yoshinobu, faced mounting pressure. Japan was rapidly approaching civil war. In 1868, the first major battle of the Boshin War took place at Toba-Fushimi. The shogunate's forces suffered a decisive defeat. After nearly 260 years, the Tokugawa Shogunate was coming to an end. Japan was about to enter a new era. In 1868, the Meiji Restoration was proclaimed. For the first time in centuries, political authority returned to the emperor. The new government moved quickly to modernize the nation. Railways were built, factories rose, and Western technology spread rapidly across Japan. The privileges of the samurai class were abolished. In their place, Japan created a modern national army, serving the entire nation. In just a few decades, Japan had begun transforming from a feudal kingdom into a modern industrial nation. The world was about to witness a completely new Japan. The Convention of Kanagawa was only the beginning. In 1858, Japan was forced to sign new commercial treaties with Western powers. New ports were opened to foreign trade. For the first time, ordinary Japanese people came face to face with Western goods, technology, and culture. Many Japanese viewed these treaties as a national humiliation. Confidence in the shogunate began to collapse. This growing anger would soon give birth to a powerful new movement. Young samurai were preparing to reshape Japan's future. After the unequal treaties, anger spread across Japan. Young samurai united behind a new slogan: Sanjay revere the emperor, expel the barbarians. They believed only the emperor could save the nation. In their eyes, the shogunate had failed to protect Japan. As attacks against foreigners increased, Japan descended into instability. The authority of the shogunate weakened with each passing day. The movement soon evolved into a powerful political force. As the leaders of Satsuma and CHSH met in secret, the end of the Tokugawa shogunate drew closer than ever before. In just a few decades, Japan had transformed from a feudal society into a modern industrial power. The world now faced a rising new nation. Its industries expanded, its navy grew stronger, and its influence spread across Asia. Japan was no longer just an island nation. But by the 1930s, the winds were changing. As a global storm gathered, Japan was moving toward its very center. From hunter-gatherers to samurai, from shoguns to industrial power, Japan's remarkable journey has reached the end of one era, but another chapter was just beginning. Soon, Japan would stand at the center of events that would reshape the world forever. After centuries of isolation, Japan had become one of the fastest modernizing nations in the world. While preserving its traditions, Japan embraced science, technology, and education. rising as one of the great powers of the modern age. From samurai to shoguns, from isolation to modernization, Japan's story became one of history's greatest examples of a civilization adapting to change. With thousands of years of history, Japan became one of the world's most remarkable civilizations by uniting tradition with innovation. If you enjoyed this journey through history, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and join us for our next adventure into the story of civilization.